Hi everybody. All right, so we're back and we're going to talk about midterms in this lecture. All right, there are going to be two midterms and each is freestanding. Neither is cumulative. The first midterm will cover the first half of the class and the second midterm will cover the second half of the class. Your exams will be entirely multiple choice, the same kind of format that you've been experiencing on the quizzes, but not the same questions. Each exam will contain 50 multiple choice items and the midterms will each be worth 250 points. So you can see that the exams are what we consider high stakes assignments in a class like this, where you want to do well on the midterms. So I want to help you to do the best that you can on the midterms. The exam procedure is basically the same as the quizzes, except for a couple of really critical differences. One is that you cannot open the midterm until you're ready to take it. So instead of opening the midterm and sort of maybe seeing the questions ahead of time or anything like that, like you get to do with the quizzes, I provide a study guide. Now, this being 0 week, I'm sorry if you hear that helicopter going by. It's still summer, so I've got my windows open. If you don't hear it, it was not in my head and I don't have schizophrenia. Okay, so anyway, so I haven't got our study guides made yet because it's still 0 week and I'm still working on it. So I'm going to show you my summer class, and this is what ultimately your announcement page will start to look like. I'll start to put different things on it, including the study guides. So again, the study guide comes as a link, a preview, and so on. We're going to go ahead and click on the link. And this is what you'll find. What I've done is given you a hint for every single item on the midterm. So you'll notice it's not quite as clear-cut as having the actual printable quiz where you see exactly the question, but you can see you're going to be asked a question about hindsight bias, for example. This is last summer. This is not your midterm. A lot of times I hit on the same topics every quarter, but don't count. This is not your, I'm not showing you yours right now. So let's say this was you last summer and your first hint is hindsight bias. So what you would want to do in preparation is probably, if it were me, immediately transfer that term to a card or a scrap of paper. I'm so cheap. What I liked to do when I was a student is take scrap paper, like that was printed wrong on the back or whatever, and I would cut it into quarters and use that for my flashcards because I was too cheap to go out and waste money on an index card. But anyway, write the term down, hindsight bias. And I never did flashcard kind of thing where I try and memorize it like that, but now go into your textbook, reflect on what you learned in the lecture or the Discovering Psychology videos, and write down everything you know about hindsight bias. Write the definition, write examples of what it means to be displaying hindsight bias. You might want to think about how hindsight bias relates to other things, like what kind of thinking error is hindsight bias. I mean, you might want to think about it in a pretty elaborate way so that when you see the question on the test, on the exam, you're completely familiar with the subject, so that whether I ask a definitional question, an applied question where I give an example like, after the presidential election was over and Fred heard that candidate A won the contest, he said, "Oh, I knew it. What kind of thinking error is that?" You'll know from that applied setup, well, that's obviously hindsight bias. So you want to think about it from an applied perspective, a definitional perspective. You want to think about it concretely, abstractly. I mean, try and take these hints and think about the material in as elaborate way as you possibly can. Write as much of it down on the little cards as you can, and rehearse as if you're going to be taking the test in a classroom, because you're only going to have an hour to complete the midterm, and the midterm's going to be in scrambled order. So it's going to be difficult to try and reflect, on your textbook or to look at your cards when you're actually taking the test. So get as prepared as you possibly can in advance using the hints that I'm going to provide. So you'll find a study guide once I have it, and I said it's in the assignments tab because I forgot to edit this since I got out of Angel. It's not in the assignments tab. It's in the study guide will be on the homepage. You're going to have 1 hour to complete the exam once you open it. So absolutely do not open the exam until you're ready to take it. So once you open the exam, it'll start to run the 60-minute timer. Even if you close it, it'll continue to run, and then it'll time out after 60 minutes, and then you'll go back in trying to take the exam for real, and you're going to discover you can't get in. And so don't open it until you're ready to sit down and take it. Do not take your exam on your smartphone, your iTouch, some kind of tablet, anything like that. Don't even pretend like you're going to do that. People misclick on the radio buttons using those devices. Sometimes those devices' connection to wireless is not as strong as a computer's connection to wireless is. So they recycle themselves all the time. And so sometimes it recycles and you have no idea it just recycled, and it submitted your test for you. And you now can't get any more questions answered because it submitted your test because it was recycling itself. I cannot encourage you enough to stay away from that kind of convenience when you're taking a high stakes test like a midterm. Plan to take the test from memory, like I said. Now, I said here that you have to click the save button, but I don't think you have to in Canvas. I think Canvas automatically saves it as you click. You can still go back and change in Canvas, but every change you make, it'll save it as you go. So if something goes wrong, it will actually record your answers. Sometimes it won't fully officially submit your exam. I usually can fix that because I can find it, but I don't think you have to push a physical save button anymore in Canvas. Plan to take it from memory means don't think, well, awesome, it's an open book test. You have 1 hour and you have 50 items. That's basically an item a minute. You are not going to have time to look through the book. So, you might want to keep your study guide with you, but you're not going to have time to look through the book. Now, if you have a disability accommodation, this is an assessment that I would accommodate disability requests for. The quizzes I don't, because you have an entire, you have a fully week, and they're all open right now. There's no reason to get any accommodations on that. But on the exams, if you are qualified for time and a half or double time on an exam, have your college's disability support office send me an email at jseaver@bellevuecollege.edu. And that is the best way to ensure that I'll really get it. I have email address at your particular college, but I don't always get everything through that email address. Bellevue is my home college, and so I'm always sure to get those emails. So, and I need to make sure that I have received the letter from your disability support office at least a week before the exam opens. So that means no later than week 3 of the quarter. That way I have time to make sure that I have set you for extended time before the exam has officially opened. If I make changes to the exam after it's opened and anybody has taken the exam, it sometimes locks everybody else out of the exam. There's no way for me to really retroactively give you any extended time either. If you've taken the exam, you can't come to me later and say, well, I thought it was going to be okay, but I really, I'm qualified for disability resources and I should have taken them. You know what? Do it in advance. And if you don't need a time and a half or double time, fine. But if you find out midway, oh, geez, I needed more time, it's too late. You need to do it ahead of time. Okay, so, and I'm more than happy to do it. I just need you to give me lead time so I don't mess up everybody else's access to the test while I'm making accommodations. Okay, so now what happens if something dire occurs? I mentioned during the quiz lecture that I do have the option of makeups, but I rarely offer them because you have to meet the criteria of what I call dire circumstances. If you make arrangements with me in advance, I usually will have you take the exam early. But I don't give early exams frivolously. I don't do it to accommodate travel. I don't do it to accommodate work schedules. I don't do it for any of those kinds of things. Basically, you have to have dire circumstances. You're traveling. I had a student have to travel to Romania for his uncle's funeral. I've had students have to travel back to China and Korea for funerals. I've had students have to travel for funerals, and in those circumstances, I've allowed makeups, but they provided for me funeral director notice, and it was all documented before I allowed a makeup. I had a student whose mother's house, the student didn't live at the house, the mother's house burned down on the day the exam was due, and it didn't affect her living situation or anything like that, but she wanted a makeup. And apparently, she apparently wasn't very nice of me to say, well, you should have gotten your exam done. I don't understand how your mom's house catching on fire at 9 o'clock on the day the exam was due impacted you and your ability in the next 3 hours to complete your exam. It blows me away. Somebody who you're not responsible for has something happen to them, and that prevents you from doing the thing that you are responsible for. You are responsible for completing your exam by the deadline. The exam will be open for an entire week. You'll have from Thursday at midnight through Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. to find a quiet time to devote 60 minutes to taking your exam. Maybe I'm old and don't understand. Not that old. But it's like, for me, I nearly cut my finger off on the day that I had an exam when I was an undergraduate. And I went to the doctor, I had 17 stitches put into my finger, and I went to my midterm and I took my exam. And when I turned in my exam, there was fresh blood on my wound, and the teacher said, I was at UC Irvine at the time, and the professor said, what happened to your finger? And I said, well, about 3 hours ago, I nearly cut it off. And he goes, and you came to the exam? I was like, well, what else was I supposed to do? And he goes, call me. Apparently that would have been the kind of dire, it was my right pointer finger. And I had to take an exam with my right hand, bubble Scantron exam. And, I ended up with a B+. Probably wasn't my world's best performance, but B+. But I showed up. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. But, And the fire marshal even sent a letter to me for this on the student's behalf. But seriously, it's 3 hours before the deadline. Why were you... I'm sorry. Get it done ahead of time. Say, oh my gosh, Mom, I'll be right there in 1 hour after I take my test. I don't know. I don't understand. The thing you're responsible for should come before the things that you're not responsible for. And you'll notice I've got this for the entire week bolded if you're going to claim illness, because the test is available for a week. Like I mentioned in the projects lecture, I'm always surprised that students wait till the very last day. I understand that I've given you the option of an entire week and there's a deadline and you have up till the very last day. But becoming ill on the very last day is one of those things that might want to motivate you to think, maybe I should do it while I'm feeling good, I'm ready, I've got good computer access, my children are at school, or my mom's house is not currently on fire, and I'm going to get my exam done, rather than waiting and possibly giving an opportunity for something bad to happen. If I do decide that you're eligible for a makeup, the best you're going to get on that test anyway is a B+, because I'm going to dock 10% off. So you're going to get best chance is 90%, which I guess is an A-. Things that don't qualify for a makeup exam. My list has gotten longer as I've gotten more excuses that people think are compelling. Forgetting when the deadline is, it's my favorite, and it absolutely does not count. Falling asleep while you're studying and sleeping through the deadline, while totally endearing, is not acceptable. Any kind of computer problem is not acceptable, because I have no idea how to substantiate a claim of computer problems. All of us could say that my computer failed, and so we should never have to do any of our assignments on time on an online class. You're in an online class, you have to make sure that you've got access to reliable computer twice during this quarter, when you have 60 minutes, when you have to be able to have an open internet access. If that means that twice during the quarter you have to go down to your campus and take the test on campus, that might be what you need to do. I actually had a student last quarter who went to campus, took the test at the campus computer. The campus had a campus-wide outage, but the beauty of that is that was substantiatable. The person who was running the computer lab sent me an email, because the student was thinking, and said, I need you to email my instructor and let her know that this is what happened while I was in the middle of the test. And the computer lab person was more than happy to do it. So there's a benefit to doing it on campus. You at least have a person who doesn't care whether you get this test done or not, who could say, yeah, I was here and the whole lab went down. That's one of the benefits to not trying to do everything at home on your iPhone. So any kind of computer problem does not count. Travel doesn't count. I don't care whether your boss is sending you, you're working on missionary work, you've had this vacation plan for months, it doesn't matter. You signed up for a class. There are 2 weeks during the quarter when there is going to be timed material that is only open for those weeks. And that's these 2 midterms. You need to work around these midterm deadlines. Being in a different time zone and not realizing that, oh my gosh, it's 11:59 back in the Pacific time zone. That goes under travel, right? Changing work schedules, I understand. Or suddenly you're having to work late. I understand it's stressful, but it's one of those things where, you've got to balance your responsibilities. Illness of injury or of yourself or your child or somebody who you're responsible for that's not severe enough to go to the doctor. I oftentimes have students say, well, I don't have insurance. Well, there's public health offices in every county. There are free clinics available in every county who can see you and excuse you from school and work. So it really is not a valid excuse that if you're that sick that you can't get your schoolwork done, that you can't get documentation from some kind of medical professional. Stressful life events. I've had students email me about their impending marriage, their impending divorce, their, stepfather who's divorced from their mom but is undergoing drug treatment, and it was a really stressful week, so can I make up the exam? These things, I know they're stressful, and having a midterm during a week is a stressful event on its own, but it's not enough to warrant a makeup. Being incarcerated. Twice in the past year I've had that excuse. Anything else that's not listed as a dire circumstance is not a valid excuse. I know it sounds like I'm being a hard ass, but the thing is, and I'm sorry I just said a bad word, the thing is, I need you to do this work in a particular order by certain deadlines so everything is released at the same time. I'm going to tell you a little story and then we'll finish the lecture. Okay, so last summer I was teaching out of a new edition of my lifespan development textbook, and so I created all new exams and so on. So I created the new exams, created the new study guides, loaded them into the classroom. Now, I've been working in Canvas for about a year now, and still I'm still kind of learning little nuances. I thought I knew how to do a clever little workaround with the exam file that would make it scramble the order of the questions more easily. And so I did that. Unfortunately, during that process, I attached the wrong midterm file. So the questions actually were drawn from the first edition of the textbook, not the second edition, and they didn't correspond to the hints that were on the study guide. Now, looking at it, I couldn't really tell that I had the wrong file attached, and so I thought everything was fine. So the students took the test, and I started getting some emails saying the questions on the test didn't seem to correspond to any of the hints on the study guide. So I'm like, what? So I go back and I look and I realize, oh my gosh, I finally figured out through a lot of delving and searching that I had attached the wrong exam file. Okay, so this happened at one school that had started a week before my other school that I was teaching for. So I thought, oh, thank goodness we figured this out now. And I realized I had made the same mistake in the other school's classroom. And so I changed out the exam file before anybody had taken the exam in the second school. So it wasn't a problem. So here's the thing. People are taking those exams on time, in good faith. Everybody's working, assuming that what I say is valid and true and that I will be consistent and reliable. I released the feedback for that midterm for the school who had the wrong exam file. So on Thursday, they had access to the correct answers to all those exam questions. And that's part of how they figured out this is not the right study guide. So unbeknownst to me, these schools are close enough to each other that people know each other. So somebody from the first school gave the feedback to a student at the second school, who then used that feedback in an effort to do better on midterm 1. Joke's on her, because I changed the file so that the exam that she took at that second school was not the same exam that the first school had taken. So completely by accident, I foiled the plan. But here's the thing. Once I release the feedback, it's out there. anybody from any school can share any information with people from any other school or any student within their own school and so on. I need students to take stuff on time or make arrangements with me in advance so that I don't release the feedback, so that the person who's taking it late doesn't have some access that people who took it on time didn't have. So that's why I have these rules. It's to make it fair for everybody. People who are working towards the goal assume that I am going to be a person of my word who say, if I say no makeups, I mean no makeups. If I give you, and so there are people who will be like I was and be bleeding and taking the test because they're like, you said no makeups. And then somebody else who's just under stress and is like, oh, this is just too overwhelming right now, wants a makeup. Can you imagine if the bleeding person finds out that I'll give you a makeup not only for bleeding, but also for stress? I mean, it's just not, I have to be consistent because you guys have to be able to take me at my word. I have to be able to release the feedback when I say I'm going to be able to release the feedback. So that's why I have these rules, to make it fair for everybody. It's not just that I enjoy it and I'm mean and that maybe it'd be extra work for me or something. It has nothing, it's 2 clicks and I could release the exam. But it's that I want to make sure that everybody's having the same experience and everybody has the same opportunities. So yes, dare I say the word fair. I have to be equal and fair to everybody. So that's why I do it. It's not to be mean at all. I absolutely do not want to be mean. Okay, so that's it on exams. So as soon as I have the study guides ready, I will post them on our homepage. So let me go back to our class. So you'll see it, see how it says study guides for midterms, and then it has the links here. This is my summer class. Your class will have that as soon as I have them ready. All right, so that concludes the midterm portion. So we'll come back and finish up the syllabus in the next lecture.